Hello everyone, it's Michael Mirdad. This is our Friday night Spiritual Insights presentation. Thanks for being with us. So today is Friday, end of a week for a lot of folks. I know a lot of you look forward to that. Friday afternoon here in Sedona, so the weather is as usual, pretty cool out and pretty nice out. But the world at large isn't, as nice as the weather here today. I know a lot of folks have emailed and asked questions, and so today some of you sent some questions, and I said, well, maybe we can address this afternoon for our presentation. So some folks are asking about, basically how to deal with or perceive, respond to tragedies and so forth. That's a huge question, of course. Some of us believe that we just crash and fall into it and jump in the mess with everybody else. Others think it's important to stay completely detached. I don't believe in attachment nor detachment. There's a difference between those and non-attachment, which is sort of in the center and literally being in our center when these things happen. One of you posted, that confusion where things are happening on the planet, and then we say, and in this case, there's earthquakes here and flooding there and the various kinds of tragedies. Please keep in mind that if there weren't global tragedies of some kind, we would still have domestic violences and interracial violences and challenges, and things happen in the workplace or at schools and so on. In this world, it's a world created out of beings that thought they could separate from love. So what kind of world could they create if they were separate from love? It would be unloving. That's why A Course in Miracles teaches us that it's a meaningless place. It's not trying to imply or teach us to become cold or even just shut down. It's saying basically that thank God it's meaningless, because there's a meaningful world, one that we don't see. Not just the ultimate thing called heaven, but even in this world there is a meaningful dimension, like a parallel universe. And so just to keep it simple, think of there being parallel universes. Heaven is beyond universes, so just imagine that being an ultimate bliss beyond. But in the universe, imagine there being parallel universes. One that represents people's darkness and one that represents our light. And the one that represents darkness has glimmers of light here and there, so that it's not too obvious that it's dark, that it's created by the ego, that it has veils of evil. Otherwise, people would just want out of it immediately and reach for the light. So that's too much. So like any kind of insidious, whether it's a family or whether it's an organization that's got such darkness, what they do is they try to hide it, right? Secrets, politics and religion and so forth. It's like in secrets so that it's not too obvious, because then the people would rebel. Well, by the same token, the world is a bigger version of that. The world is a version of darkness and betrayals and all these kinds of strange things. And it's not going to be too blatant, because then the people would rebel and reach for God. So it has to be just corrupt enough to get by. Like any type of a dark organization that is so corrupt, it has to be careful not to be so corrupt that it just is beyond acceptability. It has to be hidden enough so that people can pretend it isn't happening or there. That's what we do with religions, that's what we do with politics, but even household secrets, abuses and so forth going on in a household. So please, not to be surprised. So let's start with that. Let's not be surprised, because this is the fallen world. This is the dimension of those that are fallen ones, as some call it. So those of us who are human beings, the people in the third dimensional universe, are experiencing some form of separation. And it's kind of funny because it's like a separation anxiety. So there's a despair, there's a confusion, and an attempt to cope all at the same time. So people seem to be just doing fine, and so on. But things aren't fine. I mean, forgive me for saying, but things are not fine. The emperor is naked. This isn't our home. And yeah, something has to be done. But it can't be fixed with the same tools of the dimension that is demented. So you can't really fix it with the demented mind. And that's, again, what people do. Someone's new invention, someone's new cure for an illness. But then a few years later, you find out that that cure causes 5 other illnesses. But nobody wants to think about that because, thank God, it's curing them right now. It's curing their loved ones. And as long as that's okay, then we're just going to sweep it under the rug. People don't want to realize, even if you fix diseases, how do you fix the disease of overpopulation? Because if nobody's getting sick or dying, you have greater overpopulation. Now you have the daily anxieties and frustrations of traffic intensifying, people just destroying more and more land to build more and more houses, and on it goes, So I could just, and anybody could really go on for hours about the challenges, the problems, and so on that go on in this world. But it's not the real world. It's only one dimension of, and I'm only generalizing, of 2. One that is a world that reflects separation and all its symptoms. And then there's another dimension that reflects our awakening, and almost nobody lives in that dimension. That's not to say that it's not inhabited. Almost no human beings live much in that dimension, because you can be in the 3D world and live in that other dimension simultaneously. For example, right now, you're living in the 3rd and 4th dimension simultaneously. All of us are. If you doze off, even though you're sitting here watching this at 5:30 or whatever, 5:40 by now, who knows, you're watching this program. If you were to step aside and doze off, say a few minutes from now, you actually moved from primarily 3rd dimension with a little bit of 4th dimension in your consciousness. Your brain and your mind is operating there, and you'll shift more like 80, instead of 80 or 90% conscious mind, slightly subconscious. The subconscious is the 4th dimension. You would go subconscious, which is dream state, and you would be barely in the conscious world still. I say barely because when you're falling asleep, how somebody can walk in the room and say your name and you still hear them and you wake up. So you're still partly in this world. So we go from 80 to 90 something percent in one world or another, 3rd and 4th dimension. And in a way, your brain acclimates to that. Even your respiratory system, your nervous system, everything kind of adapts while you're shifting from one world to another. And it's kind of amazing because most people would not imagine that you're bilocating. You're in 2 dimensions at the same time. And yet it happens because the 2 dimensions are here at the same time. It's not like you're here and somewhere else. They're actually both here. Really, all dimensions are overlays. So what I'm getting to is that not only can you have 3rd and 4th dimension while you're here, it's also true that you're able to reach that parallel universe that is, we'll say for simplicity's sake, the 5th dimension. And the 5th dimension is made up, it's almost like the rainbow bridge. It's almost like the bridge, the 4th bridges us to 5th, but 5th bridges us to almost an infinite number of other dimensions, strangely enough. But 5th dimension is like an etheric life. It's ethereal. It's like heaven on earth. It's Edenic, like Eden-like. So that's the beauty of it. And, there's a lot of people that talk about, can't wait, or I want to live in that dimension, or, we just trying to get people to get along today. I mean, just observing friends that can't get along, family members that can't get along, partners, of course, siblings. I mean, if you can't get it together with them, what are you worried about in the world? How do you worry too much about, a tsunami in one country when you're having tsunamis in your own household? I mean, believe it or not, events in the world are worthy of your love, your care, your compassion, your prayers. But if you pray for them, worry about them, be careful. Because if you think too much about tragedy elsewhere, other than just you hear it, you feel it, you know something's happened, and you send prayers, okay? That's fine. But if you do more than that, and you think about it, and you think about it, it's called obsessing. Now, when you're obsessing on a tragedy or anything else, you're obsessing on dinner, anything you obsess on is a form of distraction. When you're obsessing on something outside, you're trying to avoid something inside. When you hear about a tragedy somewhere and those people, you're actually trying, unsuccessfully it's called, trying to avoid. Obsession is always about an unsuccessful attempt at avoiding an emotion. So you're unsuccessfully avoiding a feeling inside. The feeling could be, yes, seemingly triggered by tsunami and so forth, but you're really triggered by something here. For example, you see something, you hear something, learn about something elsewhere, and you go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. But it's triggering something inside. Everything outside reflects inside. So take time not just to pray for others and their tragedies. Take a moment to go, and what does it mean in here? Oh, my neighbor's child died. It's so tragic because they were so young. And well, wait, say a prayer for the child, but also go inside and say, what is this bringing up? Oh my God, the close calls my own child had, or feeling helpless. See, my inability to fix their problems could bring up helplessness in me. I'm getting to the point personally in my life where, more and more as people, let's say close to me, friends or students or whatever, that talk about their things. I mean, I'm absolutely able to go right into prayer and see them healing and recovering and so on. But I'm becoming a little less lenient when it comes to them talking about others, really, others causing my problems and so on. I'm not saying I'm like cold to that, because when it feels like someone's kicked you, then let's talk about them kicking you. I don't mind that. But if it becomes an obsession, and if you're trying to like hook me into that sort of thing, I need to look at what that brings up in me. And personally, I just feel, a bit too awake to buy into the stories of being asleep. One of you asked, how do you deal with feeling like a victim at times? And you've even had friends that tell you sound like a victim. Thanks for, sending that email in. I saw it today. First, I would tell you this. I would tell your friends, if I were talking to them, to not shame you and tell you you're acting like a victim. I personally don't take that particular course. I don't tell people, stop acting like a victim, or I don't want to shame you, because that's only going to cause other layers of shame and guilt. So what I would recommend instead is that your friends change their wording, but for you, straight to any of us that get tempted to feel like we're victims of other people's behaviors, or the world, or the economy, or the environment, or chemtrails, or the weather, whatever it happens to be. What I would say is, first of all, I'm sorry that you feel that way, and what's going on, and how can I help? First, that's the first tact. Right now, what's going on? Let's deal with it at this level. But if the person wants to go deeper with it and look deeper, heal deeper, and even if they're not, I'm going to drop little seeds to that effect, but hopefully they're willing to go deeper. But if a person's willing to go deeper and or if it were myself dealing with such a thing, I would have to recognize, do I want to know the truth? Do I want to talk about what I feel, just what I feel, or do I want to know the truth? Because the feeling is not always the truth. Quite often feelings are hijacked by the ego, and that's why you could be made to feel like a victim. And that's why some people, and by the way, when people say stop acting like a victim, it's kind of funny because technically they're acting like victims of your acting like a victim. They're actually not liking how they feel about you being a victim. What happens is they don't know how to help you, fix you, not heal you, but fix you. And so they just go, hey, stop acting like a victim. What they're really saying is, stop bringing up my feelings of not knowing what to do to fix you. You see? That's just an aside. So if you're willing to do so, you want to take time to think, and go inside and feel and, what's really happening. And yes, I'm feeling like this and that happened to me, but I'm learning to say, even if it were accurate factually on an earth plane, my highest self is immune to the behavior of someone else's ego. Technically, that's like the old saying when we say, well, if there's a God, how could God be fighting a spiritual battle with like evil? Evil would have to have some sort of might and power to be wrestling with God for so long and not yet be defeated. I mean, that's the little intellectual conversation some people have is, if there's evil, how could it not be abolished by now? So using that kind of grammar school, grade school, level thinking, try it that way and go, well, wait, it's true. If there's a God part of me, it really can't be vulnerable to the ego part. The ego can only get away with nagging at your own ego self. So my ego can't harm your real self. My ego can seem to do all kinds of things to your ego because your ego feels susceptible, and so my ego sees that and goes after that. This, one of the things about this world, when you think about it, guys, is everything is predatorial. I mean, just get that. And it's not just tragedies and earth changes and things like that, but everything in this universe is so predatorial. Two beings in the same room and the room lacks oxygen. They're both going to be fighting for that last bit of air, or to float above water, to push somebody else under so you use them as a buoy to get some air. It's just normal human survival instinct, but it's not your soul's survival, it's your body's survival, and your ego identifies much more with your body than it does your soul. So it wants you to be far more your vulnerable, fragile, mortal human self. So, it wants you to feel like a victim. And if someone else takes a breath and you don't take a breath, then they took your breath. And if someone is getting a raise at work and you don't get it, someone else got it. So everything in this world is like that. I mean, as soon as something's born, it wants fed. And when it wants fed, it's, look at the average creature. It wants fed something that was valuable to something else, whether it was the body of another critter that's being fed to it, or if it's the food source of that other critter. I mean, so try to understand, I'm not trying to overblow it because it cannot be overblown. It's so true in levels I won't even try to go into because it's very depressing if you think about it. But it's very predatorial. Human beings that come into this world and don't feel like they want to be here. They don't totally land. They're kind of not grounded, or their root chakra is not activated, or they just feel kind of dissociated, all those kinds of terminologies and so on. Even a person that struggles with multiple personality, why do you think they need more than one personality? Each one represents an attempt to survive something else. It's just so predatorial, and survival is a reaction to predatorial behaviors and consciousness. And as soon as you're born, there's something here that wants to take your life, and it's kind of strange and tragic, but it makes sense because it's a world created out of non-love, and so it's fear-based. So everything is the survival of the fittest. That's in a sense why Jesus taught that the greatest thing you can give others as a gift, the greatest demonstration, the greatest symbol is to give your life, because others, the symbolism of this world is to take. Ultimately, the worst take is to take life. And so when you give life, your life for others, it's like the opposite statement. To take life, it means I'm afraid. To give life means I'm not, and I'm in a confident state of love. And so it doesn't mean you literally have to die for others, but to give up your life, to give up your ego life, to give up your ego behaviors. When everybody in the room is afraid, to be the one that's not afraid means I'm giving up my fear on behalf of the rest of you. And in so doing, I'm doing it for myself. See, that confirms that I'm not better than you. I'm also doing this for my own good. So when you hear about tragedies, by all means, you can post it on my Facebook and say, hey, can we all pray for this? Absolutely. When you say, I'm really scared or upset by this, I never would be the type to judge you, nor should anybody watching this program say, well, I heard I should have a different approach, so I'm going to start, slamming people when they feel afraid. Don't do that at all. Let them be afraid. Let them share their fears. Let them cry. Let them reach out. But in our minds, as light workers, in our minds, we have to have a different response to that sort of thing. And the different response needs to be one of confident love, not just so-called love, confident love. I am confident that despite what seems to be happening, love is here. See, you guys sometimes are writing in as though you're saying, we have to prevent this. A story I've shared before, but once I was at a conference, and a couple of the speakers, this is at the verge of Persian Gulf War or something to that effect, one of those kinds of things in the Middle East. One of the wars, I don't remember which one it was. And a couple of the speakers said, we should interrupt this conference, go on stage, take the microphones, and do a heartfelt speech about the tragedies of war, and can you believe that this country's invading that country, and we have to put a stop, and we have to pray, and on and on. And there's nobody in the room, for the most part, that wouldn't be easily hooked by that. Oh my gosh. Oh, they're doing a big pronouncement. Let's listen. And they're talking against war. That's right. We should be against war. And they're asking us to pray. So let's pray. But you see, what happened was their behavior was completely narcissistic. They wanted to grab the microphone and just talk and sound important. That's what they did. And they wanted it to make it sound like nobody could question their pronouncements, because clearly it's all about love and non-war and so on. And yet the whole time they inadvertently, and yet purposefully in a sense, hooked everybody in to the drama. And now everybody was, instead of the peace and love and happiness of this conference, they were all in this despair and, oh, this war, and let's pray and make a difference. See, if you're a light worker, you don't pray to try to fix things on a physical level. You pray for God's consciousness. You pray for heaven on earth in a consciousness, not in your reality or opinions of what it should look like. You don't pray that people stop cutting down trees by wishing them bad, for example. You don't, you pray for something that would be the greater good for all. And you don't know what the greater good would be. None of us do, humanly speaking. So you ask for God's will to be done. That's why Jesus said, God's will, not mine. He was saying, of my little ego self, I'm not choosing to feed that ego self. So I'm not asking for my will to be done. I'm asking for my God's will, my I am will rather than my will. So it's not my will, it's my I am will be done. Creator versus the maker. The maker of the ego is the maker of illusion, and conjurer, the liar. And yet God, creator, capital C. So, these people went off on this. These are popular speakers today around the world. But, that's what happened. And it's like, so then I was asked to try to turn the conference energy around. And so I went up and I first affirmed, yes, thank you, that was great. Glad everybody got some prayer in, and yes, that's right, war is a tragedy, et cetera, et cetera. But I had to turn it back into the peace we're looking for in case it wasn't caught, which it wasn't because it wasn't presented that way. But I had to sound tactful. I said, in case it was missed, the peace that we're asking for is inside of ourselves. Don't ask for God to fix things on a material level. Ask for consciousness to be healed. That way, you stand in the light like a light being, and you're able to stand with the hierarchy of God, not a human mortal going, oh, this is quite an inconvenience. My family realities are frightened and terrified because, of a tragedy, or my social beliefs, my economic, this could, if something happened here, it could affect me economically, or I'm afraid for a race, I'm afraid for the world. Stop praying in fear. If you stand in fear and attempt to pray, you're essentially asking for fears to be fixed. Ask instead of the symptoms of the fear that are coming out there as little creatures and events. Ask why you're afraid in the first place. To heal why you're afraid, not what you're afraid about, but inside. I have forgotten who I am. How do I know that? Because I'm seeing things that are not holy. If I'm holy, I would see holy. And instead, I'm seeing, hearing, feeling, sensing tragedy, which means I must be off a little bit today. Nothing wrong with me being off. Thanks for the reminder. Let me get back on course. The external tragedies and things of the human world and things of the body are only signposts to guide us, left, right, one way, stop, yield, whatever. But our job is to just see them as signposts, not to fall in love with the signpost, not to let it devastate or affect your life forever. When it says stop, it doesn't mean forever. When it says yield, it doesn't mean only ever yield. Sometimes you're the person they're yielding to, so go. So just pay attention. Slow around the curve doesn't mean slow forever. It means around the curve. So the signs of life, when it says, life is slow down a little bit, or here's a tragedy, the tragedy doesn't have to remain. And if the tragedy really hits home, what if you're one of the people in the thing, the situation? It's the same. You just happen to be seemingly an observer, because in the universe, we play different roles. And the same thing could be happening to you tomorrow, and it may not. It doesn't matter. Whatever role you're in is the one that's right for you right now. When some of you try to rationalize and say, well, I try to figure out how to rationalize these things, and I'm not wronging anyone, because, I'm not wronging the way you respond to these things. I'm just giving examples. Some of you say, well, how do I look at this? There's a tragedy. Thousands of people died in this tsunami, and this happened over here, and that happened, and war, and this poor innocent 1-year-old died this way, and that, all these stories. What do you do with those things? Well, if I get too upset about those things, what I do know is that it's part of me that wishes they weren't happening. Wishing, I said, they weren't happening. If I'm wishing that they weren't happening, it betrays the fact that inside I don't like it. Instead of understanding it, I'm bothered by it. I'm triggered. If I'm triggered, then there's some sort of lesson, and by getting upset, I'm trying to avoid the lesson. I'm trying to get obsessed outside, focused outside, instead of inside as to what it's really bringing up. So obviously the advice would be take time, look inside and see what it's bringing up for you. I call it tracking. Look at what it's bringing up inside of you. There's this tragedy. Oh God, I just feel hopeless. And good, okay, go into that for a moment. Helpless, hopeless, whatever the words might be, angry. And then look at other times in your life when you felt helpless, hopeless, angry, and recognize, wow, I thought my today's upset was about this event over in some other state, country, city, whatever. And instead, when I did some tracking on this, I saw that it actually brought up several of my own feelings and memories. I may not literally have gone through what people are going through over there. If there's fires in California, it doesn't mean that I literally lived through a fire if I'm triggered by it. But instead, it brings up loss of a household, loss of family, loss of trust, loss, just whatever other feelings. So I track it down and I realize, oh my God, that story of a tsunami, a fire, whatever it happens to be, it really brought up a lot of feelings of such and such inside of me. That is why it's in my airspace, because it's potentially triggering something for me to see. And once I see it, it's a potential for me to heal it. The only way I can heal it is seeing it, surrendering it to God, so that I say, how would you have me see this experience, this event? And clearly help me to forgive, because somewhere in here I know there's something for me to forgive. I don't even have to know what it is. Just help me to see this clearly means through the eyes of forgiveness. By default, that's what it means. And it may not make any sense because you think, well, what am I forgiving if there's a tsunami? Well, when you track and you realize inside the tsunami is bringing up helplessness and other feelings, you'll probably remember also people involved when you felt that way. The tsunami might be a symbol or a sign, a memory, triggering a memory of someone abusing you. The tsunami might be someone, a step parent moved into your household, like a tsunami, and it just changed your whole life. The tsunami becomes a metaphor for your personal healing. Nothing wrong at all with us getting bummed, upset, just feeling the wow factor, the tragedy of, things that happened in this world. For some of us, it's been, wow, the shooting of John Lennon, or wow, the, natural disaster in some country somewhere. It could be the number of people. It could be the circumstances, I remember I remember a video of a flooding in Mexico, and without giving specifics, I remember in this flooding there was just one little girl that drowned in the flooding. She was alive for a bit, and they had her filmed alive, but then, the waters rose and she drowned. And I remember seeing other incidents like that, a glimpse of something, a flash of something in footage or whatever. I never forgot that. It's one human being, but that just really hit my heart, And I could say to you, darn, those people, they should have had better flood systems, and, dang, and it should maybe, and only, if only, and guys, that doesn't help. It's best if you go inside and look at what it represents. If I told you if only, and they should have, and someone could have, and all these possibilities of what could have changed this situation, this, little girl dying, what does the little girl symbolize to me or to you or whomever? And she symbolizes our soul. She reminds me of the sweet innocence of my own soul that came to earth and experienced some challenging stuff and lost my life, started incarnating, and each lifetime lose my life literally, mortally, but also lose my life each time I lost my innocence, my child inside, my sweetness, my beauty, my trust, because that little girl had this trust in people helping her and they didn't or couldn't or whatever. It's very powerful to realize there's so much more to it. And some of you are asking, but the rhymes and reasons. Well, maybe it's karmic. See, what you're doing is you're trying to say, Well, we shouldn't feel too bad about those people. Maybe they had karma. See, that's your head trying to make you not feel bad. Don't worry. Go inside and let yourself feel bad, but do something with it. Don't sweep it under the rug with calling it karma. That didn't help them or you. Or some of you say, okay, well, they had a soul contract. They must have chosen to come in to have that. Well, I can tell you, things don't happen by accident. They seem accidental. They seem circumstantially violent or whatever. They seem arbitrary, all that on the outside. But guys, there's so much on the inside. People know before they die. People know how they're going to die. You could say there's karma involved. You can say there's a soul contract involved. But I'm telling you, it doesn't help you to do that. It doesn't help you to intellectualize it. And that's what you're doing. You're trying to intellectualize it when you put a label so that you go, okay, I guess I don't feel so bad now that I know it's a contract or a karma. You're trying to avoid yourself. The primary point I'm making is that when we thought we separated from God and we refracted and then refracted and kept breaking apart, you and I divided from each other. And now when an opportunity comes up between you and I, any two people or more, when it comes up and we try to think it with our head, look at that person's dealing with it, look at that person's got that going on. Instead, now the opposite extreme, of course, is overly sympathetic, taking on everybody's feelings and tragedies and, hurting for them. One is to coldly excuse it. The other is, oh God, everybody, there's so much tragedy in the world. Neither is the answer. As usual, you're going to say the answer, it would be in the center. So I'm going to stay in my center and see this from God's eyes. Not just, okay, let me think. How can I see this objectively? See, if I'm still trying to figure out how I can see it without hurting, then I'm still involved. Practice. This is what I believe I'm seeing. State it. But there's another way of seeing this, and I'm asking. In fact, I'm determined to see this as you see it, God. Now, if you do that and still try to figure out what that's going to look like, you're still kind of meddling. It's better to just let it be. And the odds are you're going to feel a feeling, not see a thing. You could say, well, I'm looking at this tragedy. Here's a tsunami and all these poor people, and drowning. And, oh, it's just sick, man. Wow, look at this. And then you say, well, I'm meditating. And now I'm looking at it. And what I'm seeing is, instead of their bodies drowning, I'm visualizing that their souls are just simply riding the surf of that wave and they're using it to free themselves to heaven. That's nice of you. That's great. But you're still thinking with your head. If I say, how would you have me see that? And organically, such a vision like that comes to me, that's great. Perfect. But if I'm trying to imagine doing it on my own, fixing what I saw, making it seem nicer, or doing, like I said before, oh well, I guess it was their karma, anything like that. It's just bogus. It's just bypassing, one of those spiritual symptoms of spiritual bypassing. And we think the ego is going to tell you, if you don't do a bypass and just go, hey, see, the ego wants you to just be devastated by it either way and react to it either way. But then you think, well, I'm not going to react. I'm going to just say it's their karma. So now it's not my ego. Yes, it is. Because by you saying it's just their karma, you didn't deal with it. So you're actually adding to the problem that you're not adding to the solution. So the ego doesn't mind you acting all cold and cool and smooth, spiritually smooth, like look how centered I am, because you're still not healing. It also doesn't mind you caving in, oh my God, tragedy everywhere, I can't live with it. It doesn't mind any of our attempts to fight, flight, freeze, or whatever else it might be that we do. Instead, it's the only answer. See, the ego can't deal with you saying, God, how would you have me see this? The ego doesn't know what to do with that because it can't remove God's power. It can only, usurp your power when you're willing to give it up. So when you use your power to call back the presence of God, basically the ego doesn't know what to do with that. The tendency to be a victim, don't shame yourself, but do remember, it's not just the people that moan. That's when we typically call somebody a victim, is when they, not only do they have a sound, a vibe about them, the way they're sharing something, it sounds like wham, just deep moaning about, oh, can you believe that? Oh my God, that sounds the victim-y. That's what some people mean when they tell you that. But it's when you also repeat the same things over and over. If only, if only, if only, if only. That's another clear symptom of being a victim. Clearly that's not recommended. But just because we're quieter and not repetitive about it doesn't mean we don't act like victims. Victim is those are just symptoms of an extreme version of victim. The word doesn't mean just that you're bemoaning things and you're, repeating yourself constantly. The word technically applies to anyone who thinks that anything that comes to them can happen from the outside rather than originating in the inside. That's too big of a concept for some, so they can't wrap their mind around it. So they just stay with the other extreme version. Like any other diagnoses, we say narcissists, technically every human has a certain amount of narcissism, but we blow out and exaggerate the symptomology and then say it only applies to some. To say schizophrenia, blow out and exaggerate the symptomology and then say only some people suffer from it. But technically humans that think they're on Earth and that this world is real are all suffering from schizophrenia. Because this world isn't real, you're imagining it, just like you tell schizophrenics that they're imagining something. Well, yeah, everybody is. The fact that we think we see a world that's only a hologram and we react to it as though it's real is a little weird. Everybody needs a straitjacket because you think that when someone left you, they broke your heart. They can't break your heart. It's yours. You'd have to have imagined that you gave your heart, which isn't yours to give. It's your temple that's created within you by God. You can imagine you gave it away, and once you were dumb enough to do that, then someone can seem to have broken your heart. Then you can, oh, look what they've done. But it's just a play, a drama that you've staged, and it's kind of ridiculous. So then you go, oh, all right, I was just, being dramatic because, and it's always going to be because of some sense of lack within ourselves. The more centered we become, and I hear this more and more too, but the more centered we become, the less we're able to be victims. But I was starting to say, I see a lot of people talking about being spiritual, waking up, finding their center and so on, but they're still willing to play that. They accidentally or inadvertently fall into that victim scenario again. So do your part to not add to the problem. Do your part to not add to the concepts of being a victim, which again, means that you're willing to say or think or believe that something outside of you has power. Even if it's your love. Someone doesn't have your love, somebody else doesn't also have the blame. It's everything starts within ourselves, and you and I can and need to create more and more friendships that are congruent with that higher self. That greater belief in who we are, the knowingness of who we are. It's so essential. So keep that in mind. Work it in your lives. I'm a child of God. I'm here and I'm perceiving tragedy. I'm a light worker. What can I do about this world? Can I make a difference? Oh God, please make it go away. When you do that, you're saying, this is an inconvenience in my reality. Fix it so that I can stay complacent. That's what you're doing. When you ask God to fix things, I'm inconvenienced, my little reality. You can sound like you're being benevolent, you're trying to fix the world, heal the world, look at me, I'm praying for the world peace and all that. You're trying to avoid your own stuff. So, but you can pray without avoiding your own stuff. How? By seeing your own stuff. By being willing to say, I get it. This thing's happening. It reflects something in me. Let me bring this to the light. See, that's called responsibility, which would be the opposite of victim. So if you're wanting to know how to not seem like a victim, start speaking responsibly. You know, when people say, and you don't have to be obvious about it. If people say, oh, what should we do about this tragedy? Say, I don't know. You know, I'm taking some time to look at this. See, I didn't wrong you for doing your prayers or your protests or whatever you do about the world. I'm just using more responsible terminology. If you ask me, well, what do you mean? It's bringing up some really trippy stuff for me, so I'm just looking at it, working on it. See, that still doesn't sound too foreign to them. They think you're upset and you're working on your upset. What you're really doing is, I'm looking at what it triggers in me so that I can heal it. When I heal it, I'm healing my part in this experience. If we all heal, if enough of us heal, our reaction to tsunamis don't have to happen. If enough of us heal our reactions to death doesn't have to happen. But it has to actually happen in us. It doesn't come from a cure, medicinal cure for certain diseases to cure death. It doesn't come from certain alarms blaring out there on the coast that a tsunami's coming. It's not external means. Every external means will just create other forms of problems. That's why, something that seems to cure one disease brings several others in some way. So just recognize there's another way of doing things and summarize it by saying the other way is always on the inside. And look at how important it is to heal your own self, your own relations. Bring peace there. If we don't bring peace inside, we're going to see more and more of it outside. And last but not least, guys, 1 minute you're watching my presentations and saying, wow, this was a great presentation. Michael was talking about earth changes and ascension process and prophecies for the future. But then when things go a little weird on the planet, you're saying, what should we do about that? I don't get it. You were happy when I did the prophecies about it, and now you're concerned that these things are happening. It's going to happen. We're on this plane. We are not going to be without tragedies. Our job, however, is to escape from them internally. The only escape is to see the world differently. See, like we change our consciousness and we'll start seeing the other parallel universe bleeding through the one we're now seeing. So the one we're seeing here is all three-dimensional, tragic. The other one is ethereal and without tragedy. And that's the one that's coming to us. But for this one to come through, this one has to shake up because it doesn't want this one to come through. Because I'm talking about it coming from the part of us that doesn't want this to come through, our resistance. And it doesn't matter if you have more than me or I have more than you. We're in this together. So let's just keep doing our part to ask to see this instead of this. If you keep asking this to be fixed, it is your resistance to the higher realm coming through. You should ask yourself why you're resisting that. God, how would you have me see this means, can you show me the etheric version of this? And essentially that means help me to forgive what I think I'm seeing. And people are dying. What do I have to forgive them for? They didn't do anything to me. No, but they're symbolizing fear to me. Seeing them die scares me. Seeing them die upsets me. So I do have to forgive, in a sense. Not them per se, but you could say what caused them to die. The people that didn't give them enough life rafts. The people that didn't warn them that this was coming. Yeah, forgive them too. But forgive the people that triggered you when they died, because you don't want to admit even the people you're praying for has upset you. They have upset you. Not just the people that caused them hurt, but even the people in pain. When you see someone passing away in pain, believe it or not, you would think, I have nothing to forgive them for. I feel so sorry for them. They're upsetting you. So do mean people, guys. They're causing you to go off center. So I'm not saying they overtly are harming you. Forgive them for being an image of pain. Forgive them for being an image of lack and need. You know, we see pictures of animals being starved and tortured, and children, you know, in other countries starving, and it's so tragic. Help me, Father, Mother, God, to see them through eyes of forgiveness. And then what you would see over immediately or over time, the mind starts to change and you feel a greater peace. That these people are just playing a role temporarily, and that the light in them is unscathed, unmoved by any of this that's happening. The light in them. I understand that the outer them is going through this. I'm choosing to see this other version of them instead of this one. So in that sense, people that are suffering end up becoming light workers by showing me something that I brought to the light and saw a healed version of. Forgive them, they know not what they do. Okay? I appreciate your time, and I pray this has made good sense and can help you in your questions with this. It's a very deep and vast conversation, obviously, and the conversation will never be able to erase the hurts and wounds some of you feel for things you've seen in this life, of course. But it can give you the seeds that can grow into a different consciousness and change those things. You might feel that immediately if you allow it to happen, but you might not. You might say, this is going to take some time. I'm good with either one because it's going to happen inevitably. All right? Thank you.